Good morning, children. I will continue with the chapter of absorption by roots, and now today I will take the next phenomenon, turgidity and flaccidity. As we all know that every living plant cell, directly or indirectly, is in contact with the fluids. The root hairs in particular are surrounded by soil water. So when a plant cell is kept in water or in hypotonic solution, it absorbs water due to endosmosis. And the water continues to enter as long as the cell sap, that is the solution in the cell, is more concentrated than the surrounding fluid. Finally, a state will come when the cell will not accommodate any more water. That is, it is fully swollen, distended, fully charged with water. This state of the cell, when it cannot accommodate any more of water in it and is fully charged with water, is called a turgid cell. And the condition developed due to turgid cell is called turgidity. Now, when the cell is turgid, the pressure developed inside the cell, called turgor pressure, will be applied on the walls of the cell. This pressure is called turgor pressure. In return, the cell wall will apply the same equal and in opposite pressure on the cell content. Means the cell wall will apply the pressure on the cell content. That pressure is called wall pressure. So you can see this is a cell. The turgor pressure of the cell content from inside the cell will be applied outside on the cell wall. In return, the cell wall will apply the same equal and opposite pressure on the cell content from outside to inside. This pressure from outside to inside is the wall pressure, and from inside of the cell to the cell wall is the turgor pressure. Now, the cell, when the wall pressure and the turgor pressure, they counterbalance each other, then the cell is in the state of turgidity. When no more water is entering or leaving, its turgor pressure counterbalances the wall pressure, and therefore there is no further absorption of water, even though the concentration of solute inside the cell may be greater than that outside the cell. So the turgor pressure and wall pressure normally counterbalance each other, and a state of equilibrium is maintained. That means there is no further absorption of water, even though the concentration of solute inside the cell may be greater than that outside the cell. If at any time, sometimes it so happens that the cell wall is unable to bear the turgor pressure, that is the pressure inside of the cell content on the cell wall is strong enough and the cell wall cannot bear it, cannot counterbalance it. So the cell wall ruptures and the cell content bursts out. This happens when fruits and vegetables sometimes get burst. When fruits and vegetables, we must have seen the skin of the tomato, grapes, they burst open. Why it happens so? Because of high solute concentration, the overripe fruits and vegetables develop high concentration of cell sap in it. So more of endosmosis, lot of turgor pressure is developed. And that turgor pressure is applied on the cell wall. In return, the cell wall cannot apply back on the cell content. The wall pressure cannot counterbalance the turgor pressure. As a result, the cell wall bursts. Now a condition opposite to turgid. Turgid means swollen cell, a cell fully charged with water, in which a cell is not the opposite of turgid, where the cell is not fully charged with water and the cell content is shrunken, is called flaccidity, and the cell is said to be flaccid. That is, the shrunken cell with less of water in it, then the cell is said to be flaccid. It is not charged with water and it is opposite to turgid. Now, what is the significance, importance, and the uses of turgidity in plants? This turgidity plays many roles in plants. That is, the first is movement of water from cell to cell. The water moves from cell to cell, especially in the root cells, because of turgidity. The root hair cells absorb water by osmosis. The first cell gets fully charged with water, becomes turgid. Then the water from that cell will move towards to the further cell adjoining to it, which has less of water in it. And then the second cell will pass on the water to the next inner third cell. And this is how, due to cell osmosis, every cell of the root gets charged with water. The cells become turgid. And the first cell, which is in touch with the soil water, will keep on absorbing water. And in return, will push the water inward. Then it will absorb more water. This continuous force will develop root pressure in the roots. Now this direction in which the water flow from one part of plant to another, from cell to another cell, depends on turgor pressure. Then we'll come to turgidity provides rigidity, that is stiffness, to the soft tissues of the plant as leaves, and also help in maintenance of proper shape of the plant parts. Now, how it maintains a proper shape? When the cell of the plant parts like fruits, flowers, young shoots, they become fully charged with water, a turgor pressure will be applied on the cell wall. The cell is fully swollen and thus the shape of that part will be maintained. Then thin-walled tissue becomes very rigid due to turgidity. For example, when there is not enough water in leaf, it wilts. That is, it droops down. The petiole and the lamina become loose and the leaf droops down. This wilting of leaves is usually noticed when the plant is exposed to hot afternoon sun, when the amount of water lost during transpiration is more than the water absorbed during the roots. So during hot afternoon sun, the leaves of the plants, they droop down. They wilt and they droop down. That is, they become flaccid. Why is it so? Because the rate of transpiration is more than the rate of absorption of water by the roots. As a result, the leaf cells, they could not get enough water to be charged, and the cells start shrinking slowly. Thus, the tissues of the leaf, they become flaccid and they droop down. Similarly, thin-walled tissue, for example in roots also, the roots are able to penetrate through the soil since their tips become rigid due to turgidity. It is often seen that the plants growing on the walls, they cause cracks in the walls or in the concrete floor of an adjoining building due to turgor pressure. Sometimes you must have seen the roots of certain trees. They have been seen to crack the walls or a concrete floor of adjoining building, because the root cells, when get charged with water, they are fully swollen, they are turgid, turgor pressure is developed in each and every cell of the root. So collectively all the turgor pressure will work on the concrete floor or on the walls, breaking them and making their way out through it. Then movement in plant cells. Several plant movements are performed due to reversible turgor changes of cells, such as the first movement we'll see is stomatal movement. Opening and closing of stomata are controlled by the turgidity in guard cells. Now see, these green cells, bean-shaped cells are guard cells. These guard cells are surrounded by epidermal cells of the leaves. Now the guard cells, they have chloroplast in them. As a result, they undergo the process of photosynthesis and they manufacture food in the form of glucose. So solute is formed in it. So the concentration inside the guard cells is high compared to the adjoining cells of the epidermis. So the water from these epidermal cells will enter into the guard cells due to endosmosis. The guard cells, on receiving the water, swell up, become turgid, and lot of turgor pressure is developed. The guard cells, its inner wall is thick, outer wall is thin. So the turgor pressure of the cell content will be applied to the walls of the guard cell, that is on the cell wall. This will push the guard cells in arch shaped, and the guard cells will bend in arc shaped, opening this cavity in between the guard cells called stoma. The stomata opens. Then in evening or due to any reason, if the guard cells is in shortage of water, then these guard cells, they shrink. When they shrink, there it is, they become flaccid. So the guard cells, the thick walls, they come close to one another, and this results in closing of the stoma. This is how the stomatal movement takes place, and it is controlled by the turgidity of guard cells. So when the guard cells are turgid, stoma opens. When the guard cells become flaccid, the stoma closes. Then come to drooping of leaves. Now sensitive plant like Mimosa pudicea is an outstanding example of turgor movement. If one of the leaves is touched even lightly, the leaflets, they fold up, and within 2 to 3 seconds the entire leaf droops down. See, this is a plant of Mimosa pudicea, that is touch me not. When one of the leaves is touched, you can see the leaflets drooping down. Why it happens? It is because in this the stimulus is any external agent which is applied on the part of the plant, and at the base of the petiole we'll find when the touch is a stimulus, we have touched the leaf. The turgor pressure which is at the base of the petiole, it will move from that point towards the other end. As a result, this petiole, the stalk of the leaf, will lose its stiffness and the leaves will droop down. Somewhat turgor movements are also found in insectivorous plants. Insectivorous plants are those plants which depend on insects for their protein requirement. They trap them and use them as their nutrient. Like example, pitcher plant, whose leaves close up to entrap a living prey. Whenever a prey comes and sit at the rim of its leaf, that its touch act as a stimulus, and the turgor pressure at that point of the cell will move from that end to the other end. So that margin will become flaccid, the leaves of that margin will become flaccid and it droops down and the insect is trapped inside. Then the bending movement of certain flowers towards the sun and the sleep movements of leaves of certain plants at night are also due to turgor movements. So these are all the uses of turgidity. Movement of water from cell to cell, which helps in development of, especially in roots, to develop root pressure. Then maintenance of proper shape of the cell parts. Then turgidity also provides stiffness, mechanical stiffness, that is rigidity to the soft tissues of the plant like leaves, root hairs, and turgidity also help in the movement of plant cells like the stomatal movement and drooping of leaves. Tomorrow I will be explaining you in detail about root pressure. Thank you, children.